I heard a prayer once. Dear God, may I learn to look at myself with the eyes of understanding and love. May I be able to recognize and touch the seeds of joy and happiness in myself. These are the words of Thich Nhat Hanh. Love, joy, youth. But how can I love these poisons? The self-destruction, who I become. How do I overcome the delusion? My ignorance. How do I find purpose in my life? My craft. May I learn to identify and see the sources of anger, craving, and delusion in myself. Amen. Lost in my journey, yet stuck in this room, I asked myself for the answers. I reap nothing. My world up in smoke. I reap nothing. Down on my knees. I reap nothing. Still just as lost, I went searching. My name is Jaden. I'm a film student at Boston University. I've invited 4 of my peers, students and faculty at BU, to join me in discussing life's greatest questions. How do we find human purpose? Why do we try so hard to escape this question? And rather than reinvent the wheel, I've asked them to speak on how they found purpose in their own lives.
I think
Let's begin.
It's purpose is what kind of drives you to wake up in the morning, what drives you to do what you do in your daily life. One thing that I did kind of find in my own college experience was faith. I found faith gave me some purpose. I think that's the one thing that's kind of not changed in my life, even while I feel as though everything else has changed.
A lot of what purpose really is to me is not so much what I can get money from, or even really what I can teach. It's more just those things that you get every day, and just experiencing Earth, just the world.
In my experience, I've leaned into things that I can boil down to self-destruction in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? And I think we all do. And another word just might be escapism, and everyone does that to some extent. I'm curious, in your purposeless moment, what did you do? If you can share that, what did that look like for you? And with the question of purpose being so fundamental in the human experience, why do we try to escape this question of purpose in the first place?
First thing that comes to mind is just a song lyric. I'm just saying this now. I'll let LaRonda jump in there. But it's Matt Duke, and it says, block out all your demons with white noise, pills, and Jesus. And when I get home, I just turn off the lights. I find all my friends and lovers and online sex and reruns. That captures it.
That's it.
That's it.
Back to the song thing, there is an Indigo Girls song, it's called Closer to Fine, that basically just says if you stop focusing so much on purpose, the closer you will be to fine. So I think that space that you give yourself to just sort of be and exist and get away from the obsessive thinking, but also maybe being patient with yourself at the same time, because if you do lose yourself, and we often do, it's okay. In storytelling and screenwriting, we talk about these positive and negative charges, just to sort of motivate the good parts of the story. It's you have to show a character at their low, and sort of at this moment where they are losing themselves, so that they're motivated to get themselves out of that. And we call something like a catalyst. It can be another person. It can be anything that just, really jumpstarts that person's journey. It's important to know and recognize when you lose that part of yourself, but it's also okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. The other word I'd say you use patience is grace. You will lose yourself. You will make deep compromises your activity?
For myself, part of what drove me to pursue this project and invite you all in here, I feel like we're grown into our childhood with some sense of security in our youth. We're allowed to be youthful for some part of our lives, but there's a very young point in our life where we're brought into that system that belittles us, and we're forced to make these very difficult decisions pertaining to what do you want to do with the rest of your life. You know what I mean? You're 17 and a half, how do you want to spend the next 3/4 of your life? You know what I mean? For me, I found that deep sense of joy in returning to that youthful place in the same exact way, you know. And when I first applied to BU, I applied as a biology student because I found a path forward through those difficult decisions through medicine. And then there was a point where that didn't make sense to me anymore, and that was kind of upended, and I felt a lot of disappointment in myself and frustration with that. But I've realized now why that was upended, and it was because I was finding that youthful place through painting, through filmmaking, and I was finding it in all these different artistic things that I've always loved to do, but that I repressed in order to bring out that med student that I wanted to be. That wasn't me. And for many people, you do find purpose in that. But for myself, it wasn't the case, you know. I'm curious, like, what would any of y'all say to somebody who at one point found purpose in something that then dissolved in a way? And what do you do with that kind of feeling almost?
I would say the first thing that came in mind when you asked this question and now then listening to what people were saying was one, like, who stole your hope, right? And going back for me, like, to the first place of do you remember when you felt awe, right? Do you remember when you felt deep joy, when you were comfortable in your skin and in your body, right? When things just flowed. But it takes people a while, particularly because a lot of us grow up with faith traditions and things that are given to us, and so we don't actually interrogate them. We don't know. We don't know the substance of it. But then you start to interrogate and deconstruct and demythologize and decolonialize, and you do all these things, and you start to realize, oh, okay, wait, there's these other parts of faith. I mean, I always also encourage people to explore all kinds of faith traditions, because the one thing is like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So people for thousands of years have been wrestling with questions about purpose and how to live, and they've taken that wisdom and they've put them in religious rituals. They've put them in stories, and so go investigate, see what the Hindus tell you, right? And I know that for my own journey, my time in Buddhist monasteries, my time in Hindu temples, my time with Quakers, like all of that journey has helped shape me in a way where I'm like, oh, okay, I think I know where, and so this is the religious language, my source of living water is, right? And then I can notice when I'm dry, and I need to return to that well in some intentional way through study or ritual or just being in community with people.
One of the things that we watched that I have not been able to find, but that I'll always remember, it was prayer around the world. Right? And there was no talking, right, except for people praying. And so you see people in mosques, you know, you hear that call to prayer, right? And you go to Hindu places and you go to different Christian faiths, and you just feel this presence that we're all doing the same thing at the end of the day, right? We're all searching, you mentioned purpose, we're all searching for why we're here. And what does this mean, and what does it mean to us? And Damari's mentioned the decolonializing, which I think we have to kind of put in the room. How do you go back to a place where you have that all? And it has taken me, you know, now it's been decades. And I have a picture of her. I call her Little Rhonda. And you know how they have you like with the apple, you have like an apple or something sitting there. And Little Rhonda's got her apple, and she's just like smiling away. And I had like 3 or 4 like braids, because my mother had done my hair, right? And my aunt, who raised me, was very appropriate. And so you didn't do that. That just looked too black, right? And you just didn't do that. That's the way they were raised. That was their generation. You got to blend. You got to blend in. And so she hated that picture. I mean, just hated it. But I look at that picture and it's like, LaRonda was gone. That's when LaRonda left. Little LaRonda wasn't there anymore. And it's taken me decades to find her. And so finding that place, you know, some of us get it in a church, some of us get it at home, but it has to be repeated and repeated to us that we are something more than what the world tells us we are. And being and living into that, that's life. And I think that's what Thurman talks about, that's what King talked about, that's what Gandhi talks about, that's life. And through that, we find what we're called to do. And whether we made millions from it, whether we died poverty, we'll be like, it's okay. Because little LaRonda has lived. And Big LaRonda's mission now is to protect little LaRonda and let her live.
I think that's huge. Giving yourself space, as you mentioned. We've mentioned grace again. We've mentioned the patience, and you mentioned specifically, Tiffany, the relieving yourself from that obsession over finding purpose in the first place. I always point to like the example of a flower. It has a purpose. It serves a purpose to everything in the universe, living and non-living. But it never once questions that purpose. It just exists, and it blossoms, and at the end of the season, it dies. And then the season begins again, and it sparks new life. You know what I mean? And that's alignment, that's balance, and that's purpose. That's a purposeful existence. This conversation is an example of that alignment and that balance. Everything falling in place when the reality of this project and this production was that there was chaos before y'all got here. There were all kinds of things and all kinds of anxieties internally, and they were manifesting externally. I didn't sleep last night. Like this is hard work, you know, and it brings out these emotions, but at the end of the day, that's okay. And I just want to thank you all for being here and for being a part of this. And for being very vulnerable as well. I really appreciate that from you guys.
Yeah, thank you.